My Govana Melanin. What? I can't hear you. Do you like my new ear do? If you are interested in these ears, I will put a link in the description. I love them. They actually wrap around, so they're really great to wear. But I'm wearing these ears because I want to talk about Tolkien once again, and I have a book review that I want to do on Ents, Elves, and Eridor, which is a really fabulous book about his environmental vision. So some of you may have noticed that about Tolkien, or you may have not, but he was an environmentalist. He absolutely had a greenhouse himself, he had a garden, he was very much into horticulture and agriculture, and was very much involved with keeping a beautiful garden himself. But he was very much into really preserving the environment, and I think that he was able to weave a tale that spoke about a lot of the different beings on Middle Earth that also did the same thing. So this book is really wonderful because it analyzes both the hobbits and the elves and the ents that have a bit of a difference, but they're all working towards the same goal in preserving the environment of Middle Earth. The hobbits were the gardeners, they were the farmers. They didn't really care about what things would look like, and they would farm and grow their gardens around the Shire. And that is really how they got their food. And the elves were a little bit different because when you try to go into their culture and you try to understand where their food comes from, you don't really necessarily see them doing the work. But it's assumed and researched further by Mathew, Dickerson, and Johnathan Evans that the elves were into horticulture. And so they found ways of creating a sustainable environment around them, and that is really how they got their food. Now, some people have asked about the elves' diets. Well, the elves are a little bit different in the way that they eat by the different subgroups. So the Mirkwood elves are actually the hunter elves, and they do eat meat. So it was said that they were the ones that would have roasting meat offered to those that would come for a visit. And so Thranduil's kingdom was known to be hunters, and so they did eat meat along with the vegetables and things like that. But the high elves were not seen to eat meat. They seemed to only eat vegetables, fruits, nuts, and berries. So it really depends on what kind of elf you were. If you were a high elf, then you might be one that would only be involved with eating the vegetables that are around you. And so I want to go through this book a little bit and just read you some really interesting things, especially on the idea of the horticulture and aesthetic of the elves. So it does talk about the Hobbit Society and the way that they farmed and their agriculture. And then it talks about the horticulture and the aesthetic of the elves. And you learn in this book that the elves are very concerned about the way that things look. So they will never destroy the environment around them, even if that means growing something or building something. They always tried to find ways of making the environment around them beautiful and at the same time usable land. And so they were very much into sustainability. So those that are into sustainability today and the idea of having the environment be able to work for you but also look good as well is in the realms of the Elven consciousness within Tolkien's story. They were also very involved with use of free energy. And there are several examples and instances where they use a type of energy that doesn't quite exist. I mean, as far as we know on Earth right now, it could be very close to Tesla's idea of energy and free energy that we gather from the energy within our atmosphere. They definitely did often use a type of energy that would allow them to sustain their villages and their civilizations without using the resources of the land. When it talks about the two lights from the trees, of the two trees, this is said to be powered by a light from Valinor, which is a type of energy and a type of light that doesn't have to use up the resources on Middle Earth, but it's actually converted in a way that it powers up and creates this lamp or this light for the elves. So the elves were very much involved with sustainability, environmentalism, horticulture, and also free energy usage that you learn in this book. So it's a very interesting book that goes into a little bit more depth. So if you're somebody who really enjoys learning about the environmental vision of Tolkien and what he was actually seeing when he was creating the characters of the elves and of the hobbits, then you would really enjoy this book. I want to read this quote here. Both in their love of the beauty of Valinor and in their reverence for its memory expressed in the realms founded during their long exile, the elves of Middle-earth represent the highest form of aesthetic evaluation of the natural order. This is at the heart of Tolkien's environmental vision. So the elves represented the ability, almost in a utopian type of vision, the ability to be able to use the land for its resources that it provides freely, and then also to replenish and restore and to keep the beauty around it. And I believe that humans can get to that point where we start to be a little bit more wiser or intelligent in the way that we use our land and how we replenish it, and being aware of what's going around. You know, the Dakota pipeline, that was a massive problem because it was destroying the land that's sacred to these indigenous people that have lived there for many, many years and have buried their ancestors and have used that land as a sacred space. And so the elves find ways in which they can use the energy and the land. They could do whatever they need to do in order to live there, yet they also make sure that they are preserving the aesthetic quality of the land and they are not disturbing other parts of it. So they find ways of intelligently using the land for their needs. So it's a really amazing book that really goes deep. I mean, and look how long this book is. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It is, yeah, like 300 pages here, 272. So it's an amazing book that really talks about the different practices of both the elves and the hobbits, and it even teaches you a little bit more about the Ents and what the Ents' role was on Earth, as far as they were taught by the elves to speak to one another and to communicate. So in some kind of way they became kind of nature's army, and was able to keep out those that had destructive intention towards the forest. And that's really why they were communicating to one another and were able to talk to one another. And that's why we see later on that the Ents are not as friendly as maybe some of the other beings on Middle Earth when we get to the Third Age. By then they have seen what mankind has done to the earth and to the land. And then they see what orcs have done as well. So they really stopped trusting everybody, and also the elves have kind of left them alone, and there's less of them now because most of the elves have sailed off to the west, and the ones that remain, they kind of stay on their own inside of their villages and inside of their elven communities. So you learn so much about the actual environmental vision that has always played a theme in Tolkien's stories. So if you're somebody who, just truly loves nature and you want to learn more and more about how Tolkien used his love of nature and infused it in the books. And I think that's what makes Lord of the Rings such a wonderful series for humans is this understanding that there's this deeper connection to nature that is taught while you're reading these stories. So it's an adventure story, but it's also almost like a guide to environmentalism as well. So those that have nature close to their heart, those that are elven-like on their own, and those that truly just appreciate Tolkien's vision and respect for nature will truly love this very in-depth book about his environmental vision and who the man really was behind the stories and what he tried to do for the land around him as well as being an author. So I highly recommend this book. I definitely wanted to give you a book review on this because as somebody who, I've worked for the Green Party and I've been a Green Party member, and I truly believe that that is what our country needs, that's what the world needs, is more greener ideas of how we can use the land and use the resources that we have, but also be able to create a more beautiful environment and sustainable environment for all. And that is what I am excited about as far as what technology can offer us in the future. But we also have to have a balance, because sometimes corporations on Earth right now, they're more concerned about profit and greed, and they don't really care about the way that something looks or the way that it disturbs other parts of the land, like the Dakota pipeline. So we have to be aware of that balance, and Tolkien was able to write about the elves having that balance. So I think that that's a really wonderful goal to look towards for humanity. And if you aspire to be more like the elves and you find them inspirational beings that Tolkien wrote about, then you may want to get involved with protecting the environment more and to be a voice and a custodian for the earth, as the elves were on Middle Earth. So Hananlay for watching, and I will see you on the next video.